Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say is that you are not a free thinker if you auto dismiss ideas. We have the right to think for ourselves always. If you like the kind of work we do here and the kind of interviews we do and the kind of shows we do, please support us on redpillreligion.com. In these days of social media censorship, we're like on our third channel. You should always find us on this webpage. And you can go ahead and hit our donation buttons if you like, or buy some of our cool, sweet merchandise. Early reports on the t-shirts are really good, so we'd appreciate that. Please do find us on Subscribestar. Do find us on Patreon for now, although we're under review again. Find us on the usual channels. We're especially big supporters of Gab.com and Dissenter.com. So do find us at Red Pill Religion there. Okay, so I'm incredibly honored to say that tonight we have the publisher of Culture Wars magazine, Dr. E. Michael Jones, who is also author of a book that's all the talk of the town on independent media these days, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit and Its Impact on World History. Say hello, Dr. Jones.
Hello.
Can I call you Michael, sir?
Sure, you can call me that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Before I get into it, I have not actually read the book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. However, I've watched The Goy Guide to History, which features him, and quite a few hours now of interviews with this man, and I know I have to budget time in my other reading to get this book in. Dr. Jones actually impressed me, not because of his theories on the Jews so much, as he knew things that other people don't know to be true that I know to be true. For example, more than 10 years ago, I basically got my reputation almost permanently ruined by doing some independent journalism work with people like my friend Celia Farber over at The Truth Barrier. There's a link to her. And knowing people like, and doing work with, and knowing people like Dr. Harvey Abioui, Peter Duesberg, and quite a few others. The short summary of the work is what I concluded is that the HIV tests and drugs were highly questionable. And you should really just have a double check at everything before you start accepting an AIDS diagnosis. That's really as far as I ever went. And I got smeared 6 ways from Sunday, as did everybody else I knew. You still hear this charge that I'm an AIDS denialist on the internet. Here I hear Dr. Jones, and but it's because there's a big, massive embarrassment to Big Pharma on this issue. And I heard that come out of his mouth, that basically the truth, that the HIV/AIDS science is just a complete disaster, because it is. I'm like, okay, this man knows things. I've also heard him talk about feminism. Another movie that got my reputation smeared and almost completely destroyed was I appeared in a movie called The Red Pill by a young woman called Cassie J, which is about her journey out of feminism, because I ran up against the feminist establishment and discovered that it is in fact a multi-billion-dollar empire that will try to destroy you if you run up too hard up against it. And that things like what they tell you on domestic violence even, mostly lies, on child abuse, mostly lies, on men's violence, mostly lies, on so many topics, feminists basically lie about everything. And I also heard him talking about atheism. And so I'm going to introduce this topic and just mention this book to him and his audience if he doesn't know about it. He's not obligated to go comment on it, but I'm going to push it at him and anybody who's a fan of his to look for a book called The New Atheist Denial of History by a Professor Borden W. Painter of Trinity College up there in New England. Now, he's the retired president of an Ivy League college and has a history department in his name now, or a chair at that university. And this book exposes the fact that the new atheists were all using Stalinist propaganda and Stalin and Goebbels style techniques when they wrote their famous books. I mean, it's direct indictment of Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, not Daniel Dennett, but Sam Harris, Hitchens, Dawkins, and even people like Michael Shermer and Sam Harris come in for a shellacking. And you have not heard about this history because its publisher could not refuse to publish it, so they did everything to sabotage it and make sure nobody got to read it. Because in a sane world, it would ruin these men's careers, because the atheist movement was a secular social justice movement and was a repeat of a Stalinist campaign called the League of the Militant to Godless. I think Dr. Jones is probably aware of most, if not all of that, just because of all the things I've heard him say this is a useful research. And this too is just, if you go up against atheism these days, they try to destroy you because they're an organized malevolent cult. And I guess I will just end that little spiel there. These are like 3 so-called conspiracy theories I happen to know to be true. And they're all stuff Dr. Jones has had really interesting insights on. And but the most contentious thing, and I guess we should just start with this, Dr. Jones, is why your contentious point is that it all comes down to the Jews' denial of the divine logos.
Right.
That's where you think what ties almost all of this in.
Well, yeah,
and a bunch of other things that have messed our society up. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't start off writing about Jews. I started off probably more with feminism. I had been hired at a Catholic college in 1979 to teach American literature. And 1 year later, I got fired for opposing abortion at a Catholic college. So I realized that something had gone wrong here. I had been away from the church and out of the country for about 10 years. One or the other. And I guess I missed something. Someone should have told me something about the state of academia, the way it was, because I didn't notice anything. So at this point, I decided not to stay in academia. I decided to start a magazine instead, which is now Culture Wars magazine. It was called Fidelity at the time. And this allowed me to do independent research. So it seemed like a bad thing at the time, but it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because I got out early. I hate to think what my life would have been like if I tried to stay in academia for the past 40 years, because I couldn't have done any of the research that I've done. So that feminism got me started on it. And then one thing leads to another. You know, I started looking into the feminist subversion of the Catholic Church, and that led me to the sexual subversion of the Catholic Church, and that led me to the whole Rockefeller influence at Notre Dame and the promotion of birth control. And that led me to population control. And then I got invited to Africa to speak at Strathmore University. It was 17 years ago. And I decided I was going to talk about African AIDS. And I did. I went in there and I said, it doesn't exist, fellas. And the students were asking me, well, what should I do? I said, well, don't get tested. I said, it was made up. It's a covert form of population control.
Well, so that's what you were telling them about?
I said this 17 years ago. So okay. It was kind of shocking. It was shocking to them because they were taking me to hospitals and there were doctors who were telling me people are dying. And I said, I know people are dying. They die every day. And at this point, basically, if you walked across the street in Nairobi and you got hit with a truck, they said you died of AIDS.
I have to introduce you to my friend Celia Farber sometimes. She's another person who got just destroyed by being willing to talk about this. That's astounding. Well, I mean, it's horrible what we did to those people in Africa. I'm sorry. Yeah. Totally horrifying.
Yeah, it was. So, you know, by God's providence, I was back in Kenya again about a month ago. And it turns out that I was in the same room where I spoke 17 years ago. And I said, how many people here woke up today worried that they were going to die of AIDS? Well, nobody raised their hand. It completely disappeared. Nobody talks about it anymore. Well, what happened? We were in 17 years ago, the week before I got there, Kool and the gang showed up at Uhuru Park in Nairobi to give a concert, telling them they were all going to die if they didn't use condoms. Well, you know, it didn't happen. And I got to go back 17 years later, and I got to give the whole review of that whole thing and then talk about how social engineering has morphed during this period of time to the point where now they're not telling you you're not going to die if you don't use condoms. They're telling you you have to strike down laws against homosexuality because now homosexuality is the new form of social engineering.
Which used to be supposedly the primary vector of AIDS, which, right. By the way, there was always reason to even question that one.
So it was something miraculous happened over this period of time, largely because in 1984, Margaret Heckler stood up and announced that they found the cause of AIDS, and they said it was a virus. a virus called, it came to be known as HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, when before that, everybody knew it was a lifestyle disease associated with homosexuality.
I'm going to briefly interrupt you just because I'm always I'm literally afraid to tell people these things because they treat me poorly. So I've got a guy on my side. I'm going to recommend a movie that it's not perfect, but if you want to get an introduction to everything that's wrong with everything on the whole big pharma, HIV, AIDS things, look for a movie called House of Numbers. You'll find it's interesting. This is a suppressed film. You can't get it on Amazon except in DVD form. You search the internet for it. Basically, people put up free mirrors of it that go up for a little while and then get censored. This movie is really hated. Yeah, just like Morton Painter's book, they go out of their way to suppress anything about this book or this guy. This movie, same way. Everything they said about HIV and AIDS is unbelievably dodgy on the science. I'm not even telling you what I think HIV is or does because I'm not qualified to tell you. I'm telling you the science is so bad, it's postmodern. And nobody should trust their own HIV diagnosis until they've quadruple checked themselves and looked at some of this other material. Thank you for being willing to just speak bluntly about that, sir, because I think a lot of people have died unnecessarily.
Yes, I did another. I caught up with this story again because I did a little book on the Cincinnati Ballet, and it turned out to be a history of Cincinnati in the culture wars, the role that Cincinnati played in the culture wars. And I did this because my son and his wife were dancing for the Cincinnati Ballet, and basically I wanted to talk about ballet and how people were being pressured into acting like homosexuals, even if they weren't homosexuals. And the reason, the key here is all of your relationships are supposed to be transient, sterile relationships. And so my son and daughter got involved in there. They fell in love. They got married. They invited everybody to the wedding. The director didn't come. And then she fired my son and promoted my daughter-in-law as an assault on the family. And as a result, my daughter-in-law got pregnant and inspired other ballerinas. Four ballerinas got pregnant all at the same time. Something never happened in the history of the ballet, all because of a kind of protest against the world that they were pressured to conform to, which is basically the homosexual lifestyle, even if you're a heterosexual. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Cincinnati became important in the culture wars around 1990 because they had an exhibit there by a man named Robert Mapplethorpe, who was a photographer. And this was the cutting edge of a lot of different things. It was a cutting edge of obscenity at this point. It was a setup because they knew that Cincinnati had a Catholic conservative population. They wanted to have an obscenity trial, and they got one. And basically, it was acquitted, and it was considered a great victory for free speech. Now, Mapplethorpe was dead at this point. Now, Mapplethorpe was famous. He had a significant role to play because he was the one who created the image of the heroic homosexual. Before that, nobody had an image of a homosexual. And we all had these experiences we had of, like, when I was a young man hitchhiking and being picked up by these creepy guys in the middle of the night. And I'm just trying to get out of the car, you know, that type of thing. Well, he changed all that. He became, in many ways, the world's most famous homosexual. And then the whole AIDS scare broke out. And he was afraid that he was dying of something or other. And so he decided to go to the doctor. And at this point, a lady by the name of Matilda Krim entered the scene. And she became the head of the major AIDS organization. And their great blow, their great crusade was to legalize AZT. Well, AZT killed all these people. So,
oh God, you said out loud what actually some people in the establishment have all but admitted to. Well, AZT killed people. It was horrifying.
It killed all of these homosexuals. So this lady eventually went on to get the Medal of Freedom from Bill Clinton, probably because she had slept with Lyndon Johnson. But her claim to fame was that she had was a great crusader for the rights of homosexuals and getting them the medicine they need. No, she killed them all. She was the one that fast-tracked AZT, and AZT killed all these people.
It has been admitted that if you dosed anybody with AIDS today with the levels of AZT or AZT as they call it, with what they were giving the early AIDS patients, it would be criminal malpractice. The drug is incredibly lethal.
They have directions about what to do. You have to call the hazmat team if you spill it on the floor, and you're injecting it in these people. And so what you had here was examples of Arthur Ashe. He died.
Oh God, he killed himself.
He didn't die of AIDS. He died of AZT. Or you have Magic Johnson, who is test HIV positive, and so he goes to the doctor. He says, "This is making me feel terrible. I'm not taking it anymore," and he's alive today. I mean,
can you verify that story?
That he's alive today? Yes.
Or that he doesn't take the drugs. I don't know if he's ever admitted that, because I remember we publicly challenged him on it, and he was completely evasive on the question. But he sure don't look like a guy who's been taking HIV and the H cocktails. He really don't. That's all we're saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So this is just one instance. I've done a number of articles on this. This, for some reason, I could say whatever I wanted. Nobody ever said anything to me about HIV. I guess I was on nobody's radar screen when I was doing this. I guess
you must not have been, because really, there's a lot of people I could name. Some of whom are dead now, some by their own hand, some honestly possibly killed. A lot of us are convinced Christine Maggiore was murdered. But which would never get out in the regular mainstream press. They'll call that a conspiracy theory. Yeah, it's been ugly, Dr. Jones. If you crossed the drug companies at the wrong time, they would come after you to destroy your reputation and to psychologically terrorize and destroy you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was always on the edge, but I think the thing that pushed me over the edge was when I published The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Now, as I said, up till this book came out in 2008. Up till that time, I had been in business for about close to 30, 20 to 30 years, publishing things like I just told you about Africa and AIDS. And then I did The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, and suddenly I'm on the radar screen of the Jewish organizations. So the SPLC launches an attack on me. They have to couch it as there's a new series, a group of hate groups out there. It's Catholics, the new hate group. And they lumped me together with 12 other guys who had nothing to do with me, because they had to come up with a group. But I feel sorry for them, because in a sense, the only reason they were dragged into this thing was to attack me as the head of some type of group.
Hey, listen, you're now officially affiliated with someone else who's been targeted as a hate organization by the SPLC. So now you got more SPLC stink on you. You got near me. Because when you challenge feminism, things happen to you. Okay, and let's go ahead and get to the purpose of this book, and where I actually see where you're going, but there's some things I want to challenge you on this. You really do seem to think most of this is really rooted in denial of Jesus Christ, the divine logos.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Shall I state the thesis of the book?
Well, let me just say, in every discussion we had here, while not all the people at the top of these things, all these weird so-called conspiracy theories that are true, there's a lot of J people in there. They're not all J people, though. I mean, we'll stipulate that. I'm sure Dr. Jones won't dispute it. So go ahead, state the thesis of the book, sir.
The Jews were God's chosen people. At the right time, God sent his son as the Messiah, Jesus Christ as the Messiah. He came to this earth in the flesh. And the Jews had to either accept him as the Messiah or not, because God gave them all free will. And so the Jews, basically, the Jews who accepted Jesus Christ, they became known as Christians. And we know from his disputation with the Jews that these Christians are now the children of Moses, because Moses was waiting for the Messiah and Moses accepted the Messiah. The Jews who rejected Jesus Christ are known as Jews today, and they are in rebellion against the law of Moses. They have a new religion that they founded after Christianity as a result of the destruction of the temple. Now,
Right.
the point I'm trying to make here is that when the Jews rebelled against Jesus Christ, they rebelled against the Logos. This is the way St. John describes him. He is the Logos incarnate. Logos is the order of the universe.
Right.
When you rebel against the order of the universe, you become a revolutionary, and that's what the Jews have been ever since for the last 2,000 years. And the book is basically an attempt to describe the effect of their revolutionary activity throughout history.
Classical science, and this is for my audience, we try to educate people on these things. Classical science, even as we have it, is rooted in this ancient Greek and Christian, because St. John the Apostle clearly wedded, you know, the Jewish religion and Christianity with Greek thinking when he specifically called Jesus Logos. That a way of thinking about it, the Logos would be like all those orderly things that make the universe go, like the laws of probability in physics. That's the Logos. I mean, I'm not saying Jesus is gravity. I'm saying the governing laws of the universe, like probability, physics, and a whole bunch else. So it's not that crazy an idea. The science came out of these axioms that the world is ruled by these fixed laws, and which only work if there's a lawgiver. And that's what modern science is. Even scientific naturalism's axioms is based on this idea of the Logos. For those who don't know, the thing is, though, where I kind of want to push back is that we've had some real smart Jewish scientists and thinkers, and maybe this is an emotional appeal at some level, but I have known me some. One of the distinct things I have noticed over the years is that secular atheist Jews, non-religious Jews, or let's just face it, Reformed Jews aren't even real Jews. They're not serious. The pious Orthodox Jews I have known are really hideously repulsed by everything we're talking about here. They're hideously repulsed by LGBT. They're hideously repulsed by porn. They're hideously repulsed by dishonorable behavior. They advocate honesty in all things, being honorable, getting along with your neighbors, respecting your host country. You know, they say all these things. I guess they could be lying to me, but they're real serious about it, and they're real pious, and they really believe there's a God. And I'll just give to my testimony. I used to be an atheist, and smart Jews helped talk me out of that. So I got a real fondness for them. Can we really pin this all on the Jewish religion when so much of what we're talking about makes a pious Jew want to vomit?
We're talking about the Jewish people.
Okay.
Not so much the Jewish religion. We're talking about the Jewish people. It was the Jewish people that killed Christ. Now, does that mean every single Jew in Jerusalem at that time shouted, "Crucify him"? No.
No. And all his early apostles were Jews.
We're talking about a civil war among the Jews at this point that only got worse as time went on. So first of all, we have to exclude race as any type of common denominator here. That's clearly not the issue here. The identity of the Jew, according to this thesis, is rejection of Logos. Okay? The Jewish people, as a group, rejected Logos. The Jewish people, as a group, called for the death of Jesus Christ. The Jewish people, as a group, are killed Christ, and they are enemies of the entire human race. Okay, now,
Woof.
group. I just did an interview with Dr. Michael Brown, and he immediately said, "Well, you're an anti-Semite because you're talking about the Jews as a group." Well, no, that's not anti-Semitism. That's not anti-Semitism. First of all, anti-Semitism is a racial ideology. It's biological determinism. That's the man who created the word in 1871. It was Wilhelm Marr who created it. And secondly, it's not anti-Semitic to say there's a group called the Jews. But according to the current definition, yeah, that is the definition of anti-Semitism right now. So you can...
Okay, sir. Well, here's my thesis, and you can test me on this. I believe that the term anti-Semitism was coined by secular atheistic Jews who were not really friendly to the Jewish religion, who wanted an identifier for the Jewish people that was not religiously based, and that's what a lot of secular Jews and Jewish organizations are, because they're in denial of God in general. And some of them are even into weird occult religions and Luciferianism and crap like that. So I mean, I guess I'm on your side on this, but I see all these evil people into things other than the Jewish religion, and, well, you're saying the people. But I mean, if they've left the reservation and abandoned the Jewish religion, how are they still defined by this?
Because the religion is not the heart of the Jewish people. The rebellion against Logos, it's a negative identity. It's rebellion against Logos. That is the only coherent identity that these people have had over this period of 2,000 years. So you get into discussions that my Jews have me on their shows, and they say, well, you know, I know a Jew who is against abortion. Well, I agree with you. I didn't say every single Jew agreed with this. I said the Jewish people agree with this. That's a political entity. Okay, it was a political entity at the time of Jesus Christ. It was called the Sanhedrin. That was the leadership organization, and that was the group that mobilized the people and led to Christ's death. There is still a group of people that is the leadership of this group of people that still mobilizes this people for political effects. It's called the Leadership of a Conference of Major Jewish Organizations. It's called IPAC. There are all kinds of big groups that are part of it, but they are still there. It's still a cohesive group, and it's not anti-Semitic to say that there is a group. So at the same time that Dr. Brown is telling me, you know, you're an anti-Semite because you say the Jews did this, he does a show on a program on his show talking about how Jews are smart. Well, he goes to the Jewish Museum and he says Jews are smart. Well, it's okay if you're saying the Jews are smart. As soon as a goy like me says something critical, then the whole thing changes. There's no such thing as a group of Jews. I know a Jew who doesn't agree with what you say, and so therefore there's no group. So it's a shell game, and it's been a shell game for a long time, and it's time to just be honest about it and say what it is, because you cannot address the contemporary situation right now without involving the Jews. It's impossible. You can't. I was in Mashhad, in May, and the Iranians are upset because they signed a nuclear agreement, and then Trump just tears it up with impunity. I said, there's 3 reasons why we don't have a nuclear agreement: Sheldon Adelson, Paul Singer, and Bernard Marcus. If you can't name these people as the cause of the thing, if you can't say the Jewish interests are involved in taking over and commandeering our foreign policy, you can't talk about anything of value when it comes to foreign policy. You cannot. It's that simple.
All right. What do you think about this as something of an alternative hypothesis, which still would involve the Jews? I actually think denial of God in general, or any idea of God, i.e. ideological atheism, is probably the most dangerous ideology. And we see when Jews abandon any idea of God, or when Christians like Stalin, or even people from a Buddhist background like Mao go atheist, and go into complete denial of God, that's when they become really dangerous. And it seems to me like maybe I'm in denial or something, or missing something, but the pious observant Jews seem like the ones who are the least likely to be a problem. It seems to be the ones who go off the reservation, just like Christians like Stalin who go after the reservation, become atheists, deny God, and mayhem ensues.
Well, when I said that in Mashhad, there was Rabbi David Weiss sitting across from me at the table across from me. He's a Jew who's a member of Neturei Karta. Neturei Karta does not believe in Zionism. They hate the state of Israel. They think it's an abomination, and they're working to get rid of the state of Israel. Well, does that mean that there are no Zionists?
Well, no, Zionism is a secular ideology, though, is it not? Zionism is a very secular ideology.
I'm saying, yeah, Zionism is a secular ideology. But I'm saying just because Rabbi David Weiss is against it doesn't mean that there's no such thing as Zionism. It doesn't mean that Zionism controls our America's foreign policy. I said there at the meeting, I said, if all the Jews were like Rabbi Weiss, we probably wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have a problem. But that's not the case. And if you ask the question, well, why is it not the case? Well, the answer is the Jewish revolutionary spirit. That's why. That's what I'm trying to describe. This is the heart of the Jewish people. It is their rebellion against Logos. That's what's driving history at this moment.
I will, by the way, just to shout out to the audience, to our friend Rabbi Yehoshaphat Oliver, who we had on Saturday night to talk about some of these things. Folks, I mean, I will say this, and I know Dr. Jones will probably agree. There's no justification for harming the Jew, and there's no justification for mistreating the Jew. And I remind you of what I just said. You find Jews pushing, anti-Christian hate. Well, there's Jews who don't do that. You find Jews involved in pushing homosexuality. There's Jews who want to vomit at that. We can talk about all those things, but you can't deny the existence of an awful lot of people with names like Steinem and just Jewish name after Jewish name after Jewish name on feminism, Jewish name after Jewish name after Jewish name on LGBT activism, the ideological kind, not the compassionate kind, because I do advocate compassion towards gays, not mistreating them, but that's another topic. You find them everywhere. And your thesis is, I mean, maybe you would say that they grew up in a milieu that, if it started religious, was still rooted in denial of Christ, denial of the Logos. And then even if they're not observant, that's just part of the self-identified Jewish culture and everything they do now.
Well, I mean, everybody's culture has gone down the drain over the past, I don't know, what do you weigh, 70 years?
Oh, for sure.
I am. I mean, so the Jews who, I mean, I know Judith Reisman, who, exposed Kinsey and the pedophilia there and so on and so forth. And she talked fondly about growing up as a Jew in New York in the 1930s. Well, those days are gone, and everybody's culture has gone down the drain. And the problem is that it was largely the result of Jewish revolutionary activity that destroyed this culture. Including Judith Reisman's the culture she liked as well. I mean, Rabbi Dresner, Sam Dresner, was a big supporter of my work way back in the 90s. He wrote a book deploring Woody Allen and people like this. Yeah, obviously, the will is free. People are creatures of Logos, even if they're raised to be, in some sense, in rebellion of Logos, and they wake up to the fact of what's going on, and sometimes they disagree. I'm saying every Jew has to, at a certain point, has to understand the nature of the group that he was raised in. And at this point, either you join the group or you do not join the group, or you have someone like, for example,
the Jews themselves, even culturally, often describe themselves, painful terms growing up as an outsider in a world that doesn't accept them because they're Jews. There's this perpetual outsider status. Even if they didn't even grow up in a religious home, there's this persecution idea that's just kind of embedded there, it seems, in a lot of cases.
Yes. And the persecution, in my humble opinion, is a function of Jewish behavior. So the more obnoxious Jewish behavior becomes, the more the threat of persecution arises. So during the Middle Ages, the issue was usury. And at a certain point, if you enslave the entire population with debt, they know where you live. They know you've got the records in your basement. And so they just rise up and say, look, we paid back the money 5 times already. I'm not paying it anymore. I'm burning your house down, and the king is going to expel you from our country. That was the story in England. It was a story in every country in Europe at that time. So the point here is, we have to, if we're going to be honest about this, we have to bring antisocial Jewish behavior into the discussion as well. That invariably gets eliminated. And now we've got a situation where there's this colossal double standard, okay, of the kind that I just mentioned. But basically, I write a book about Jewish involvement in pornography, and I am immediately called an anti-Semite. This is a terrible thing to say. So there's a Professor Abrams in England. He writes the same thing. He takes everything in my book. This is an article. It's a chapter in the Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, and just says, yeah, but it's good. And I'm saying, yeah, but it's bad. Well, he gets published in the Jewish Quarterly. Well, we're saying the same thing. Why am I being demonized because we're saying the same thing? Same thing with gay marriage. I say Jews are behind gay marriage. They call me an anti-Semite. Amy Dean brags about it in Tikkun magazine, and there's it's not a problem.
Right.
I'm sorry, but this double standard has got to stop. You're ruining people's lives for saying the same thing that a Jew said is unconscionable, and it's got to stop. We got to stop this, because if for no other reason than for the benefit of the Jews, because the Jews. Let me put it this way. I wrote this book 11 years ago, and ever since I wrote it, I've been called, the groups like the ADL and the SPLC have been calling me an anti-Semite. Well, the first thing I said was that the Catholic position on the Jews was sicut Judaeus non, which is basically no one has the right to harm the Jew. You suppressed my ability to say that. So you, I'm talking to the ADL, are responsible for people like the guy that went into the synagogue in Pittsburgh and shot all those Jews, because you're constantly suppressing any type of open discussion of real issues. And when people reach the point where they feel I can't say anything, I'm just being demonized, they pick up guns and start shooting.
Yeah, let me make this point. Anybody who's Jewish or not, or friends of Jews, or whatever, anybody who wants to talk about Christian persecution of Jews, I think you will find that every serious Christian is willing to admit, especially any Catholic Christian, because frankly, we are the true Christians. We are the ones who keep the history. We have had shameful behavior towards Jews from Christians, but we've had shameful behavior towards Christians from Jews an awful lot. And I would think that a fair thing to be saying is we ought to be able to talk about both sides of that if we're going to be and admit what's happening. It's not that Christians have always behaved to their own best standards. But we should be able to talk about both sides of anything like that, shouldn't we?
There are certain people who would say the very fact that you're saying there are two sides of this is also anti-Semitism.
Yeah, right. And that's just the reason.
Because let me put it this way: I can say this has to stop. It is stopping. Okay, it is stopping. It cannot be stopped at this point.
Well, at some point, there almost seems to be like, and it seems like the devil's always doing this. He keeps pressing and pressing and pressing. We've had like 30 years of pro-Jewish media, including Jews making fun of themselves, to the point where it's like, well, if you're allowed to do that, we're allowed to do that too, and we might want to talk to you about some things. I do think that that's fair, because you're right, man. You tell us we can't criticize, we can't make the jokes. I mean, Owen Benjamin, for example, has made me wince a few times. But I'm like, man, I sat through the 70s being told, and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s told I should accept all sorts of edgy comedy that challenged me and made fun of me and made fun of my values, which, by the way, Jews were a big part of. And it's true. Jewish people were just very overrepresented. They're like 2% of the population, 4% of the population worldwide, and yet they're all over our entertainment. They're all over banking. They're all over government. And it is true, Zionist interests. I used to be pro-Zionist. I woke up on that, just like I woke up on feminism. I red pilled on all these things that we've talked about so far. I'm sorry. I guess I just rambled. Did you want to pick up on any of that?
I'm just agreeing with you. Whether we like it or not, the discussion is now taking place, and they can't stop it now. It's too far beyond being stopped. So they create all these alternative media, and immediately people use them to tell the truth, and then they want to censor the truth. But it's just not going to work. So let's have some type of viable, workable modus vivendi where we can discuss these topics. How can they argue with that?
How can they argue with that? In fact, I will just put it out there for you. On some people who are really on the anti-Jewish thing, who are egging this on, do remember harming Jews is not okay. Number one. Number two, there really are. I've noticed it for more than 20 years. The pious, observant Jews are of a completely different breed. And I know people will say, well, the Talmud says all these bad things about Jesus and all that. Yeah, but Talmud was partially from oral traditions that came even before Christ. And some of it's true and valuable. And engaging and recognizing that we have some shared values here too is a start. You know, embracing our shared humanity and our shared values is important. And I want that to be just, I don't think you're going to disagree with any of that. Are you, Dr. Jones?
Well, I'm not going to endorse the Talmud. I mean,
No.
the Talmud is anti-logos.
It is.
The Talmud was created in reaction to Christianity. The Palestinian Talmud came out 300 years after Christ, and the Babylonian Talmud came out 600 years after Christ.
Everything I know that there was an extant Jewish oral tradition, and some of Christian tradition is based on that. And
we're talking about the codification and publication of these books. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the Talmud was created to keep Jews from Christ.
We warped it.
So
it warped anything that was true in it. It warped anything that was true in it, is what we as Christians would say. Anything that's true winds up being tainted by this denial of reality. Is that a fair way of putting it?
I'm getting back to my main point, that the identity of the Jew became rejection of Logos. And rejection of Logos can take place in a number of different ways. And the Talmud is one of them. There's no question that the Talmud is created to keep Jews from Christ and to keep Jews from the Logos. If you get to I mean, one of the sources I used throughout the Jewish revolutionary spirit was Heinrich Graetz, the father of Jewish historiography. And he said that the Polish Jews were ruined by studying the Talmud because it taught them how to cheat and lie. Well, you're going to argue, is he an anti-Semite?
Who is this guy again, sir?
Heinrich Graetz, the father of Jewish historiography. Is he an anti-Semite?
I would think not.
Am I now an anti-Semite because I'm saying what Heinrich Graetz said? This is the type of ridiculous situation we have reached now.
And so, what do you think of the theory that that there's multiple racial groups, like the current Ashkenazi Jews are not really even originally from Judea, and the Khazar hypothesis? I'm skeptical of it, but I don't know. What do you think of it?
The Genome Project has shown that the Ashkenazi are Turkic people. They're not Semites. So that just destroys the whole theory that there's some type of racial continuity between Moses and the Jews today. It doesn't exist.
I've seen at least one source try to dispute that one, but I'm not going to get in the middle of it. Huh?
Well, it's the Genome Project, so you can argue with the Genome Project. My thesis has nothing to do with DNA whatsoever. Because
right. So it has to do with the Jewish identity is in denial of Jesus, the denial of truth. Because, by the way, for the audience, if you don't understand, the very idea of truth, people will say Jesus is truth. That's because the Logos, without the idea of the Logos, you can't say what is true. The Logos defines what is true.
The Logos is the order of the universe. And the Greeks had an understanding of the order of the universe that was kind of static. I mean, geometry was their creation. Geometry is obviously a manifestation of some type of understanding of the order of the universe.
Of the mind of God, yep.
That's right. And so, and they had a very, they struggled to try and figure out what God was because they didn't understand creation. Aristotle felt that the world was eternal. And because he felt it was eternal, he confused time and causality. And the result was that he didn't have a clear understanding. He had a notion of God as the uncaused cause and the unmoved mover. He was perfect. He lived in eternity. And so why did he need us? And that was a problem. And then Plato came along and said, well, no, God is the demiurgos. He's the worker for the people. He created the world. He's intimately involved in time. He's intimately involved in our lives, but then he's not eternal. Well, then so you have a choice here. Is he good or is he powerful? And this is what the riddle that Christianity solved when St. John wrote the gospel in Greek, because what he did in effect was say that he honored the Greeks for their honest efforts to come to understand the world and the world that we lived in and the rationale behind it. And the word they used for that was logos. And so he came and he said, In the beginning, there was Logos.
Yeah.
There's been a time when there wasn't Logos. There's never been a time when there's emptiness and chaos, which was all the oldness.
Fundamentalist Christians, Bible thumper Christians, you need to be listening. It is those of you who disparage Greek philosophy as having anything to do with Christianity, you are fools, speaking without instruction, because it's the use of that word logos, which is traditionally translated as word in English, but it is literally logos. Just is was packed with so much powerful meaning for its Greek-speaking audience, which is who it was written for. Everybody knew what he meant. It would be ridiculous to say that that was not what he meant. And I've heard some fundamentalist type Christians just get mad and they don't want to hear this, but well, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, God honored the attempts of natural reason. It wasn't perfect. In many ways, it wasn't successful, but it was an honest attempt to understand it. And John, by writing the gospel in Greek, said, we respect what they did, and we're using their terms. And these terms are good, and they help us to understand it. But we need to take it to a higher level. And Logos is God. That's the third sentence of St. John's Gospel. And Logos is God.
Yes,
well,
in the beginning,
that means there's a whole different dimension now. In other words, we've resolved that problem, that dichotomy that Plato and Aristotle had, because now there are three persons in the Trinity, and we have the idea of the Trinity. But also now we have a God that is active and alive and active throughout history. And suddenly you created a whole understanding of history that the ancient world didn't have. So it was a turning point in human history. And the Jews, by rejecting Jesus Christ, have been on the wrong side of history for 2,000 years. That's not to say they haven't been caused problems. They have caused problems. But it's been these revolutionary movements that are constantly disrupting the spread of Logos in the world that has caused so many problems.
To give everybody the quote, if it was the original Greek, if it was rendered properly, it was instead of in John, the Gospel according to John, chapter 1, verse 1, traditionally says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." But the real way of looking at it, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, because that's what it says. And John was the gospel, was the apostle to the world, speaking to the broad community of the world, speaking in very erudite Greek that philosophers and educated people would understand as well as common people. So there's just no mistaking this.
No, I think John wrote the gospel in reaction to St. Paul's speech at the Areopagus. St. Paul went to Athens. First of all, St. Paul was expelled from the synagogue by the Jews, and he turned his back and he said, I'm going to talk to the Greeks now. So he goes to the Areopagus left Ephesus, where there was idol worship, the cult of Diana. The silversmiths made money by creating little idols. And he goes to Athens and he talks to them as if they're idol worshipers. And I think he made a mistake. I think he made a rhetorical error there. And they reacted unfavorably. It's in the Acts of the Apostles. He told them, this man, I'm talking about this man, and he died, and then he rose from the dead. And they said, oh, he rose from the dead. Well, we'll talk about that some other time. I think St. John realized you have to have a different approach to these people. These were philosophers. The Areopagus were the heirs of Plato and Aristotle. They were sophisticated thinkers. And I think that's why John wrote what he did. I think if St. Paul had gone to the Areopagus and said, in the beginning, there was Logos, and Logos was with God, and Logos is God, I think he might have had a different reception. That's my feeling.
That makes perfect sense. And listen, Dr. Jones, we're getting near the end of our hour, and I think this is a real good time to start wrapping up. I hope we can maybe do it again sometime. This has been just utterly fascinating. Without going too much further, I still want to talk to you sometime about the idea of, what about all these other weird religions like Luciferianism and Theosophy, and with all kinds of non-Jews very visibly doing very, very evil things? Is it still your contention that this denial of God that ties to denial of the Logos that comes to Jesus just ties to everything bad like that?
Anton LaVey, his real name was Levy. He was a Satanist.
Oh dear.
I can go down any number of different paths here. Okay, I tried primarily to talk about revolutionary movements. Most of the revolutionary movements at the beginning were religious movements, and so there's a chapter on the Hussites, which was the first Protestant, if you want to call it that. It's not called Protestantism, but it was the first revolutionary movement in Europe, and it was all people, basically horny nuns and priests who didn't like living according to the vows of chastity, of poverty, and obedience, and decided they wanted to live like Old Testament prophets. And the Jews loved it, and the Jews were there helping dig the trenches during the Hussite rebellion in Prague. Louis Israel Newman wrote a book, which I quote repeatedly, and he said every single revolutionary movement in Europe was supported by Jews. So in the beginning, they were religious.
So it all appears to get to me to denial of Logos in generally. Any people that define themselves as denial of God, denial of the Logos, denial of truth, automatically get set up this way. I mean,
I think look, if you're going, it's a binary system. So if you turn away from the church, and you want to consider yourself religious, there's only one other place to go, and that's the Old Testament. And so what you do, and if you say every Englishman has the right to interpret the Bible according to his own lights, that Englishman is going to be much more attracted to the Old Testament than he is to the New Testament. And you're going to get somebody like John Milton, who was a Puritan, a propagandist for the Puritans, who his wife left him, and he fell in love with another woman. He wants to get a divorce. Well, Jesus had something specific to say about divorce that seemed to be a roadblock until Milton decided, well, I'm going to think like a Jew. I'm going to go back to the Old Testament and write my treatise on divorce based on my interpretation of Moses in the Old Testament. These were all of the original, the early revolutionary movements in Europe. Over the time, they became secularized, but you still had Judaizing religions in America rising up like toadstools after the rain in the 19th century. The Mormons being a good example.
Yes, all of them. Right. They're all rooted in Old Testament denial of the Trinity, which is a wicked heresy. Although he's brilliant, someone ought to call out Vox Day on that sometime. But the denial of the Logos, I mean, if you deny the Trinity, you've destroyed any Christian understanding of the Logos too. I would contend. If you just say I follow Jesus, Jesus is God, you're almost turning him into just being God the Father, or you're making him a created being or something. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
I've been to Iran many times. I've been to mosques. I think that these people are worshiping God, the same God I worship. They're worshiping that same God, but what differs is their understanding. I don't think they understand him properly.
Their understanding is warped and improper. Yeah,
and I think that they lived off by themselves for a long time, and nobody really cared one way or the other. And now we're in a world where suddenly we're going to have to resolve these issues. But I think that the misunderstanding of the Trinity in Islam had serious consequences. Yes. One of the most serious being that science did not develop in the Islamic world, even though they were way ahead of Europe in terms of Aristotle and all sorts of breakthroughs
and stuff. Yeah,
medicine with astronomy. It just didn't develop because you need a proper understanding of Logos, state-of-the-art understanding of Logos, the relationship of God to creation through the incarnation. All of these things are necessary if you want science to develop, and that's why it didn't develop in Islam.
And this is why developing at minimum a respect to the Catholic religion is going to be necessary for anybody who's talking about saving Western civilization. Hint, hint, all you alt-right Catholic bashers. The Catholic Church may be under a crisis of horrible leadership right now. What else is new? But the Catholic faith has the correct Christian understanding that has driven European civilization either pro or against. And by the way, I'll even comment, it seems to me that an awful lot of Jews of some sort have gotten awfully cozy with fundamentalist sola scripturis Christians. And I think that's because fundamentalist sola scripturis Christians are Jews' favorite type of Christians. And because
Well,
that's where you, and I've seen they'll give money to Jews, you know, not pious Orthodox Jews, but Jews will give money and to Christian ministries to promote them because they'll be pro-Israel.
Right. This is a black op known as dispensationalism. It was the Schofield Bible. It was promoted by Jews in New York who understood that the fundamentalists were weak in this area and they could be dragooned into supporting the Zionist cause. And that's what it is. That's what it is today. That's what Jerry Falwell, the late Jerry Falwell, did for a living. And that's why Menachem Begin gave him an airplane so they could fly around and spread this distorted understanding of the gospel.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Preach it, brother, as I will say as a former Protestant myself. Well, this has been utterly fascinating. Everybody, there was a couple of things I didn't get to. Maybe we'll get to them another time. Maybe we won't. But everybody, this has been a real pleasure. Please check out the book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit and its Impact on World History. Please also check out culturewars.com and his frequent webcasts and find him all over the place. Catch us here on Red Pill Religion every night. Tomorrow night we're going to be having on By McFarlane of Mary's Advocates to talk about the civil rights violation and what to do about it. The civil rights violation that is no-fault divorce, aka unilateral contract severance. And
give Bay my regards. I did an article on her 30 years ago.
Oh, awesome! I will do. Thank you so much.
Bring that up. She'll tell you about the article we did.
That sounds. You know what? I'll get you offline and I'll link that for people. All right. So everybody, please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. Find us on redpillreligion.com and God bless everybody.